Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's sometime in March 2023, and this is a teaching called Risking Joy and Happiness. And I'd like to start with a prayer because I like to do it that way. It will take about an hour, and then if I have the energy, do some questions after that. Give acknowledgement to the holy mystery as it lives within us and around us and through us. We give acknowledgement to our ancestors who are kind and wise and loving, and also to those who are in need. We give acknowledgement to the flowering earth and to the elder powers who hold up the world, and to kindness and love. And I ask that the teaching be useful tonight, and that I show up in a way that's good for people and kind. And thank you to the tech and to everybody present and the people they're traveling with and the ones who listen in later. It's good to be alive. Shay. So, welcome. The guiding question I want to drop out at the start, and then we can explore it a bit, is what's so threatening about joy and happiness? And if it's not like that for you, that's fine. But I think it's like that for some of you, at least. I can't be the only one who has that feeling. So let's explore that a bit. And before we do that, I want to briefly say a thing about some of the offerings at Ancestral Medicine. I'm actually teaching a course on this. I was convinced to do that, so I'm going to do that starting next week. It's a short course of 4 lessons over 90 minutes, and we have a guided practice, and it's like this, just a little more involved. So that's next week. And then also later this month, there's a course called Initiation to the Life of Ritual that is beginning. It's a year cycle, but you can do it a season at a time. And that's about looking at rites of passage and different developmental needs throughout the lifespan from a spiritual perspective. And we have a good time with the course. This is a good one. And then the animism course, which some of you have taken before, we're holding it in a new format with other live teachings and calling it Loving the Earth, Practical Animism, Skills for Relationship. So in a sense, that's the more earthy stuff, but it's relational skills that apply for humans as well. And that begins in April. And finally, the practitioner training is open if you actually want to be a necromancer when you grow up, or learn how to relate with the dead professionally and help others with that. That's a thing. Actually, we're doing that, and we have a good time with it. And the training is pretty like dialed in. We have it pretty refined. And this cohort is centering Asia and Oceania in terms of the regional focus. It means if you are from there, connected to there, there's a good chance there's some scholarship support available. So those are the things happening, or at least most of them. So why is joy so potentially at least threatening? Let me situate myself. For one, I have a cough, and that's very humbling, and had COVID over the holiday, and now the almond blossoms here in Andalusia, which are glorious, are pollinating my face and my lungs, and that's intimate and cough inducing. And so if I'm coughing, I'm okay. That's what's happening. And but I'll say, because some of you haven't encountered me before or whatever, but I'm down lineage from early English and German settler colonialist in North America, and born and raised in the United States, and been living in Spain just since last fall with my wife and our 2 young girls. And culturally, I'm a ritualist. That's what I've trained in for most of my life. And I also happen to be a doctor of psychology and a therapist. None of those things prepare me to teach about joy necessarily. Therapists are not happier than other people, like really. And being a ritualist, or like being a spiritual person, having a spiritual identity, doesn't make someone more fulfilled or happy or in touch with joy necessarily, one way or another. And being a white guy doesn't make someone inherently happier. Like, if anything, for me at least, people process their ancestral identity in lots of ways. But I was reflecting on this, and I'm like, man, why am I so like inhibited about openly, like publicly expressing happiness? And part of it is I worry that it's rude or culturally insensitive. As someone who's a like privileged American white dude, is like apex cultural predator in some ways, in terms of like systemic harm or positionality, to be like, I'm so happy, everybody. And I'm not saying that's a helpful story, but I name it as a way to like, oh, wow, this is a way of noticing what my idea about cultural mindfulness, how it impacts my emotional range. And do I want to keep holding it in that way, or not so much? And so anyways, there's a little bit about my background, and but none of that means I know what I'm talking about with joy. On a personal level, I'm a little bit depressive or dysthymic in therapy jargon. I'm kind of anxious. I'm a little like neurotic as a person. And I've done a lot of therapy, but none of that actually means that, like, it means that I actually feel like a little bit of an imposter on this topic. Like, I could teach about grief, and I'm teaching a course on evil and malice, and all those things are comfortable to me, but joy is out of my comfort range, and that's fine. But I was preparing more than average to try to say something today authentic, and I was up before the girls, which occasionally happens, and the moon, we live a little bit in the hills, and the moon was just peeking through the clouds before the sun was up in this really particular way this morning. And it was helpful because it helped me to name that it's not about the amount of joy necessarily, because I don't know that I feel like an above average amount of joy and happiness. I'm in touch with that some. I'm in touch with it more than I used to be. And I've always been at least a little bit in touch with it. I haven't had an awful life. And but the thing I'm interested in is the dynamics around it. Like, am I blocking that? Am I intentionally cultivating that? Do I have a story about that being less valuable than like sorrow or other kinds of intensity? And and part of what I notice is that there is charge around it. It does feel vulnerable. Like, to Brene Brown, as someone who's a very popular person, I respect her work a lot, and it's her assertion from a lot of research, and I believe her, that this holds at least for a lot of people she's talking to, that joy is kind of the most vulnerable thing we could express or access. And that's not going to be true for everybody. But for me, when I hear that, I'm like, ooh, that's validating. Because even with my therapist, trying to explain to the poor guy, like, he's starting to get it a little bit, but I don't mean to pick on him, but I'm like, really, man, like the grief is easier for me. I can go there. It's the happiness. He's like, well, what's our work about then? I'm like, no, hang with me. I actually need you here for this. And so there's well, we'll get into it in a minute. But my point is, I'm winging it on this topic, but my curiosity about what that process is like and what the teachings I've been absorbing over the years have to say about it means that I might have something to add to the conversation. So let's see. I made a notes of like a half dozen what feel like key themes around this. And then I'll offer a little dialogue and a little embodied practice, and then maybe a little more dialogue. The first is, and these feel grounded in both psychology and my experience of kind of ritual and ceremony and all that. We really don't need a personal reason to feel joyful or happy. There's not, you might find a trigger for it, but there's not always going to be a trigger for it. Take the same thing and be like, well, why are you sad? Sometimes if you like, I don't know how it is for you, but sometimes if I'm sad, I don't always have a reason. I don't know. I'm like, because I can smell the burning forest. What do you need me to say? Because of the like, I can give all these like dramatic reasons, things happening in the world, but I don't always know. It's the same with joy. And it can be that we're vibing on the joy of others. That happens all the time with our girls. My goodness, like her recent thing is like zapatos, flamenco, papi. She's just like strings words together. She's like, I want my sister's flamenco shoes so I can crash around the house. And she goes crazy with them. And it's really super sweet. And like, I could be in a bad mood and it's going to shift my mood. And so notice, I say that because notice if you feel like you need to justify what you're feeling. It's okay to just be happy. You don't need a reason. Your circumstances don't need to be great. That's the second point is, yeah, of course our circumstances matter. It's easier typically to feel happy when your body's not in pain, when you're not experiencing systemic oppression and harm on the regular, when your conditions are, favorable, when you're loved. It's easier to feel in touch with joy and happiness. And we all know this, but just to state it, like there's a lot of people who have great conditions and are super unhappy. It's actually when I notice my own depressive tendencies most is when I'm looking for some kind of problem in my life and I actually am not locating it. I'm like, oh, it's me. Oh, noted. Okay, let me just go meditate or something. But not that I'm a problem, but like I brought the mood to the party, right? And similarly, there are also a lot of folks whose conditions, if you traded conditions with them, you'd be like, oh, I am now unhappy. I just like, they have objectively harder conditions than you do, but their soul is in better condition. They're happier, like in a fundamental way, like they're more joyful. And people who are super resilient or super cultivated, I guess, sometimes end up having a really, really difficult life, and they're super intact during it, and they're actually well during it. And so it's just a way of saying like these states of joy and levity and play and it's like happiness, they're kind of about our outer conditions, and may we all have the just good condition. And also, they're not only about that. We can have an internal locus of control that allows us to like bring our source of joy with us, even in the difficult condition, right? So maybe that's obvious, but that feels important to name in the mix. A third key thing here is and this is like I'm talking to myself a little bit here too. So like allowing joy and happiness to move through, and allowing that to even be really present sometimes, or even a habit, is not going to cause us to lose touch with the sorrow in the world, with the injustice, with all the other challenging things. Range isn't like that. It's one of the qualities I associate a lot with wisdom. I think it's a good goal to try to be a wise human being. So if you want to be wise, you're going to need either to notice it along the way or intentionally cultivate range and flexibility. So you're not attached to just one spectrum of experience. And usually that means noticing your comfort zone and then gradually like reclaiming ground. You're like, all right, well, I'm totally avoidant of sadness. Let me sign up for some therapy and cry my face off somehow for a while. And then, okay, so I'm less avoidant of that. Now I'm, so you're expanding your range, right? So just expanding your range, that's not the same as making an identity out of it. It doesn't define you. Now, is it possible to make an identity out of it? When I say that I like squirm a bit at joy, or when I'm like, okay, I'm giving a very serious point by point talk about joy, like I know, aware of my vibe here, then it's because I've kind of made an identity out of it in a way. Or maybe it's my temperament, I don't know, and like the little bit depressive, serious thing. I know that I'm 45 and I'm not going to go to war with my personality, but I know that it's possible, even if we have created personality habits and identities that cause us to be more defined with certain kinds of experience, it's possible to be suspicious of that a little and to invite in experiences that threaten it or interrupt it a little bit. And that is actually a great way, if you happen to have a goal. I mean, this gets into the fourth point, which is like joy is happens to be useful as a thing to cultivate. It sounds so like pessimistically capitalist to say it that way. Like, it's like, what are we going to make out of this joy? But the way I mean it, like, hang with me for a second. The way I mean it is that sometimes there can be the story that it's like naive or frivolous or indulgent or not like connected to the suffering of the world to be happy, as if you've abandoned the world through your happiness. Your happiness is a betrayal of the suffering of the world. Come on now, like that. But the story can be there, and it, to the to the contrary, one of the most healing things for trauma, for example, is an experience of pleasure in your body, of safety, of nurturance, of sweetness, and of being like loved back into wholeness. And that requires letting in kindness and tenderness, and you might even accidentally like be happy for a moment and then learn to tolerate it a little more over time. And so it's also the case that if you notice that you don't inhabited in this spectrum of experience, that choosing to give care and attention here, it's pleasurable, right? Even though it might be scary and stir up a lot of stuff, it's an easier sell in a way than saying, oh, you should do a lot of grieving. Have you read the news? And additionally, besides it being pleasurable, what happens when we move toward what we've been avoiding is we create more space in the middle, in the center. And the direct contact with what people mean when they're talking about enlightenment or non-dual reality or the mysterious source of what is as it lives within us and is us, that we don't need to do anything to add to that. But there is a clearing away of the things that are obscuring it. And so if we're just identifying with certain kinds of experience, then well, it opens up more space. Now I'm not really talking about joy. I'm talking about like claiming what we avoid, right? We're moving into those spaces, but to circle back on what we're actually talking about here, hang with me. I don't have a script about this. I've taught to it before. Mercy. When I say joy is like healing and useful, what I also want to say there is it takes some courage often to go there. It's been a minute, but I've officiated, maybe not quite 10 weddings. And I like officiating weddings. And one of the things I'll always say in some way or another is like, hey, look at these two people. Like, what an unreasonably courageous thing they're doing to affirm this, that a partnership can actually work. And whether or not you do other things or have or don't have children or do it this way or that way, that's not the point. It's just like that love, that you can like say this commitment to loving one another and caring for one another is so important to us. We're going to affirm it. We're going to we're going to make these vows in community space. There's something so like irrationally hopeful about that, that it occurs to me in what we're talking about. And that way, choosing to meet the horror in the world with an affirmation of love and steadiness and even happiness, that's not naive, that's strategy also. That's a very intentional kind of move. Two other things, and then let's chat for a minute. Joy, like all the other like primary colors in our psychic palette as humans, is not just human. It's not just a human thing. And it's easy enough to be like, cute fuzzy kittens, look at them playing. Like, sure, I mean, come on, even grouchy people can probably internally soften a little at the cute animal pictures, but also the blossoming trees and the bees and the care that they're crafting the hive with, and the way the earth is moving through space right now, and the almost quiet sound of it. I asked our older daughter tonight, it's like an hour ago for her bedtime, I'm like, Maeve, she always wants me to tell me stories about about my childhood. I'm like, oh damn, it's like another therapy session with my 5-year-old. And but I was like, Maeve, is there anything that doesn't change? Because I'm always like, everything changes, things change. Anything that doesn't change? And we had the sweetest like minute and a half of just silence. She was very alert. It was in the dark, but she just didn't say anything. And I almost interrupted it. And I'm like, no, what a good answer, you clever girl. And I am just, eventually I was like, isn't the silence lovely? And that was it. And so, I mean, kids, being around young people or animals or growing things are easy mirror and catalyst for joy. At least for me, it's very healing being a parent. But it's not just the humans, the deities, the spirits, the other world. Joy is not just a human thing. And the last thing I wanted to highlight is we don't own our joy any more than we own any other kind of experience we're having. There might be times where it is really empowering and it makes good sense to be like, hey, this is my experience, I'm going to be true to this. There's a way of like claiming it as an experience you're having and be like, I'm going to guard this a little because the world is being harsh. So I'm going to stay true to my joy and my authenticity. So I'm not saying it's bad to frame it that way or whatever, but like any bigger kind of spectrum of experience, there's 24/7 like programming on the joy channel. It's easy to notice that for me with grief. I'm like, oh, you're having sorry to pick on my therapist publicly. I'm pretty sure he's not here, but but I was trying to share with him because he was having this view of like grieving, like you kind of get done with it, and I'm like, oh no, it doesn't happen like that. Like I'm like that, like we got that one dialed in. Like my inner child or inner adult or whatever it is got the pulse on the horror in the world. I could turn my attention to it, and it just floods my psyche. It's available, no worries, and it's a inexhaustible well, 24/7 programming on the grief channel. But the same is true for joy as well. There's people like in this very moment, like having just fantastic healing, like sobbing with tears breakthrough on stuff they've been working at for years. Or people like being met with kindness, like in their 70s for the first time ever in their life, and actually softening in a way that they never thought was possible. Or just like people who are alone, like just like a parent and a child, and a parent like feeling so frustrated that they want to like shake their kid, but not doing that, and instead taking a breath and remembering themselves and being kind, and like on and on and on and on. Like pick your flavor of it. There's people being silly and goofy, and making love and doing like all the, whatever's like of the 59 spectrums of joy. You can choose your flavor of it. But it's when it comes, it's not that we own that. It's moving through, and there's, to put a more fine point on it, it's rude in a way to reject what is arising. And if you're used to God bringing you intensity and creativity and passion and sorrow and all, this usual stuff your vessel has been carved out to receive, and then suddenly you start feeling happy, and it's confusing. It's rude in a way, and there's like a subtle rudeness to it, to push it away. It's like saying, no, I actually am really attached to only operating on these other spectrums of experience. And so in that way, I don't know the Farsi, but there's Rumi is a very well-known Muslim mystic, speaks of the guest house and the house of the aware person being a place of receiving these different gifts and experiences from God, and not turning them away, of relating with whoever is appearing to you as a treasured guest. So that, it's that same spirit that I'm talking about. I'm not sure that I answered, or will even try to answer, exactly what's so threatening about joy and happiness. I'd like to, before long, bring it to direct guided practice, so each of you can explore it a little bit directly in your own. But I wonder if there's a question or two, or somebody who would want to share a thing. Let's let it be open for a bit. Nate?
Friend of many bears. Hey, buddy. So it's interesting to me because you say you're winging it. And from my direct experience, you've unleashed mountains of joy in my personal life spiritually. And I'm sure hundreds of other people who've done the ancestral lineage healing. The interesting thing is that in other cultures, the Dagara, the Taoist, the fire element is the portal that we access the ancestors through. And the movement of fire is outward, outward, outward. And when I was doing that course way back when, there were two different chapters or phases that brought so much joy. And I experienced that outward fire, which is also inside of us, at a very different level beyond my own personal kind of definition of joy. So I have a question that I'm wondering if your years of ancestral stuff, if you can see deeper into that. But the two parts of the course, the one where we find out what the blessings and the burdens are that are passed down, freed me from thinking, oh man, I'm just such a mess. To know that certain things I wrestled with, generations had wrestled with, put perspective into my life that needed me. And I just instantly, I was excited about it, even though it was like, okay, now I can see it's a bigger mess. It was wonderful. And then also the blessings, like, okay, these are blessings on the way. And then the other thing was the shared alliances, like maybe another word is totems. What are these old alliances some of our peoples have had? To find the alliances like with bison and panther and sea serpent, two or more wise and well lions at that point had those same alliances. And it wasn't just my totem and my little worldview. So this outwardness, this connecting, when we go into ancestral lineage healing and we free up all that tangled chain, are we then going to go past this idea of joy as something that is a moment by moment experience instead of a continual stream? What's your thoughts on that?
I know, I don't know. That's my first thought. But let me try to say something though. I know that for me, I was conditioned heavily to experience myself as a singularity, as an individual. It's part of what I'm like 2% into my detox with from moving out of the United States. I can't even, I can't count the amount of moments or years lost in that confusion. And there's it's not that it's false, it's just incomplete. And so I have found that working with my ancestors and helping others to do that is a sneaky and effective way to interrupt the illusion of us being separate. And that is initially all about healing and transforming intergenerational pain and all that. But at a certain point, you end up getting painted into a corner where you're like, oh, you're like looking for healing to do, and the ancestors are like, hey, relax, we got you. Hi, it's okay. And that's very sweet, because the belonging that can flow from that, if you haven't already been raised in it, if you haven't been experiencing it, can be really healing and joyful. And I know that's been true for me. And it has caused me to have this place of real empathy. And like, I see you, I'm not leaving you kind of feeling for others who have also been conditioned to believe that they're very alone. Made me so mad and like sad, mad the other day to see this picture, just writing about it, I think, in the newsletter, but of our daughter. She's 5, and one of her vocab words is non-living. And I'm not going to make a thing of it, really, at school. I already complain enough. And but I'm like, really? You like training our kid on how to make sure that she knows that the stones and the river and the ancestors that you don't even talk about are non-living? I'm like, why you got to be training the kids to feel alone? And so, but I see it, and it hurts my heart, because it reminds me of how I got that training, and I'm spending years unraveling it. That's what's what we're doing here. I'm unraveling it publicly, and so together. And the last point, I guess, it seems over time that the more we contact any given spectrum of experience, the more we realize, like a child that comes to trust, and have like secure attachment. They're like, oh yeah, God's also made of sorrow. God is also pure rage. God is also joyful and bliss. Interesting. Okay, I don't have to worry it's not going to come back.
Mhm.
Not worried the sun won't rise tomorrow. So in that way, I suppose there's some trust that happens. Yeah. Thanks, Nate. Yeah.
Mhm.
Let me jump around a little. Savite, help me to say your name well. I'm sure I didn't. Yeah.
Hi. It's okay. It's actually pronounced Shavite, but it's just there's no
Right.
H in it, so it's tricky
Right.
like that.
Probably a sub dot under the S. Yes. Good. Go
Yes.
ahead.
So I appreciate this. This is very beautiful. I think what was coming to mind in speaking to range and the discomfort that many feel in trusting that joy and happiness, because it is often associated with some kind of circumstance or some kind of um, catalyst or something like that. And it's work that I've been doing for the past year because like you expressed for yourself and maybe many folk here, yeah, I'm very comfortable with the Kali Shiva path. I'm really comfortable with Loki, hell, the those kinds of currents of transformation. And um that's a space I'm really comfortable with. And then there's beginning to have trust and engagement with, like, in an Eastern teaching, which is part of my spiritual background, is that understanding of Lakshmi, or that principle of abundance, and that kind of a different foundation of safety that's different from a foundation of transformation in some ways. So that's just what came to mind when we were speaking to all of that. But if you have um, ideas or experiences re- relating to, I think it's really important to honor those spaces that we're in that might be hard and challenging. I don't like the idea of we always have to like make sure we shift and change to be happy. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense, kind of? But I think there are wonderful places where we can make choices to engage a different spectrum without dishonoring the places that we're in. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Can you speak to that a
Yeah.
little bit?
I can. Yeah, I can try. I mean, I. Oh, there's a tradition in Islam about the 99 Isma Allah, or the names of God, and uh, and one of the understandings of that particular area of focus, so far as I understand it, is that you're attempting to recognize these different aspects of the sacred in yourself, in the world, etc. And I also see it as kind of a diagnostic of where you're comfortable, where you're neutral, and you're like, okay, that one doesn't have a lot of charge for me, but I get it. And I'm like, ooh, that's uncomfortable. That doesn't feel as sacred, or that doesn't feel that feels foreign to me. That's something some other people do. That like gentleness, kindness thing, that's not my thing. And in which case, those are indicators that there's really good medicine in those places. So yeah, we got to be true to who we are. And within that, I feel like if our long-term goal is to be wise, there's a certain amount of neutrality and flexibility that is a part of that cultivation. And it means that holding our identification lightly, even if we are like a 75th generation manifestation of a lineage of initiates of the divine dark mother, and like have dreams of her in the night and wake up, and I mean, just like, even if you're like so much whatever it is, He's just that thing. You're still not only that. And so yeah, I think that's the longer path of growth, is having that flexibility and even choosing a little bit to be like, oh, this is out of my comfort zone. I'm gonna go do that instead. And I might feel less in my mastery when I'm doing it. But in the longer term, I'm actually going to be more relaxed and less fragile, because I'm more in, yeah, there's more space carved out. I was at a Zen retreat years ago, and one of the students was describing two of the different teachers. They're like, this one teacher, he's great, he's very charismatic and got a lot of good things to say, etc. And but this other one, he's like an old brown shoe. And it was this really heartfelt compliment. And it's like he has achieved old brown shoe status. So, may we be so well as to be average at times also. We should do a practice here. I know some folks have questions, but then what time we have will be a little more rich if it's after the practice part. So let's try it like that. We'll spend just 10 minutes or so. I'll talk you through it. It's just a place of direct listening to your own guidance about what we're talking about, so we make sure we don't get to talking only about such matters. Start, if you would, just by bringing your attention to your heart and your belly, your feet. Like, be present in your body, however that is for you. And ask your intuition, ask your guidance to take a moment to connect with the way that the sacred presents to you right now, with any trusted guide or power that you already feel good about. Take a moment to resource with that. And from that place, allow that your personal space be clear from any interference, and that you be in a protected and contained space. And start just by noticing one or more places where you have really met the big spirit of joy in your life. Even if you're not there now, see if you can gift yourself with a few moments of noticing someone or something that brings you joy, or a place where you've had deep contact with joy. Just let that quality be present. And staying just connected to that spectrum, that feeling, quality of joy. Take a moment and listen. Is there anything that we've been speaking about that feels important to hear or notice? Just take a moment of listening intuitively for what your guidance would reflect back to you in this moment. And if you'd like, you can drop the question into your intuitive space of what is so very threatening about happiness and joy, and see what your own heart and your own guidance would show you about that. If it feels useful, you might notice the connection between joy and courage. That feels like an alive one for me. It might not be where the energy is at for you, but I offer it just in case. And if you'd like, I'll take a moment and notice from your place of connection to your own center, trying to stay connected if you're able to the place of sweetness or joy as you've known it. At this moment, just the humans for the moment, that there's so many others around the world right now, and including near to you, who are really easily in touch with joy and happiness. You might be, you might not be, you might be somewhere in between, whatever. But it's possible to take just a moment and notice in your awareness just how many different people of all kinds of bodies and ages and places were vibing really strongly with their happiness and joy right now. And if you would take a moment and notice the folks for whom it comes less easily, and those who are shaky about it, are really private about their happiness for all kinds of different reasons. And see if you can sit in a place of solidarity and empathy with those folks who might include you, but notice that there's a lot of people who actually do feel some happiness now and again, even though their life is mostly hard or they're mostly not feeling that. And there's a way in which it's good for us to say, I see that in you also. This also lives in you. See if you can find a moment of that. And take another moment before we wind out of just relaxing in presence and see if there's anything important on an intuitive or heart level for you to hear or anything that needs to happen here. Hey. I'm interested if anyone wants to say a thing for a moment about the question. I can say from my side, I worry it won't be received. That's part of why it feels threatening and scary. And it's not that we always need that, but sometimes we do. And sometimes when we have something precious, I occasionally write poems, but if I'm feeling in a mood, I might share them publicly. But on the other hand, I don't share my poetry with everybody. It's that same kind of thing about, is it going to be received? And yeah, I could say more, but I want to listen as well. What is it for you that Janet, I see? If you would, because we have just a few minutes, so go right to the heart of it,
Yep.
if you would.
So it was the two things you were saying. I had learned that nobody ever brings more joy to the world by being sad. So I'd been practicing that, and that goes against that idea that somehow feeling bad for people is good. But then when I get really joyful, then I'm around people and I feel like I'm hurting them because it makes them feel insecure to witness my joy. So then you said it right at the end, then it's like I do my joy in private for the most part, right? And I'm letting it out, but that it's this crazy balancing in the systems we've set up.
It's true that sometimes, I mean, I won't say who wrote it in the chat, but is this kind of as I have an adverse reaction to something somebody wrote in the chat, but I want to speak to the content of it. Even when I'm setting up a talk on joy, I'm like, oh Jesus, what are people going to say? I try not to not listen too much. Be like, oh, I'm glad you're lightening up, stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, don't take it for granted. And but then somebody's like, well, why? If you're not very good at sharing joy, why wouldn't you let someone else on your team should do the teaching instead in the chat? And we do have a great network of folks. Let me plug them. It's the Ancestral Medicine Practitioner Directory, and they're great. And many of them are very connected to joy, and I'm certain that for some of them it comes more easily. And partly it's just my platform, and I'm going to do my thing. But also, I think after I noticed my grouchy feeling about the comment. My feeling is that sometimes when it doesn't come easily for us, then we have differently useful things to say about it. And it doesn't come easily to me. I feel I'm aware of feeling a fair amount of sadness throughout the talk even, but it's not, it's the tender, it's the sadness of having sat with a fair amount of kids that were experiencing different kinds of abuse when I was working as a therapist, and of actually reaching someone, of that hopeful look, and being able there's a tenderness I enjoy or close in my experience. And it's not an easy topic for a lot of people. And when it brings up sadness, it's not just about who's going to be more free at the karaoke and just more, able to access their silliness and levity and all that. It's fine. There's that spectrum of it, but there's another spectrum where it's really vulnerable. That's the part that's interesting to me, because there's power in that. There's the courage, the heart courage, vulnerability stuff that is the way in with all this. That's well, for me, that's exciting. And I'm ooh, when I'm intimidated by it, I know I should probably move toward it. And the fact that I'm clumsy at it positions me to be helpful to certain kinds of people about it. So that's why I'm doing this teaching, even though I'm not an expert at it. So I partly needed to just get that out of my system by responding there. Okay, I got it. Andrea.
Hi, Daniel. You asked what came up during the meditation, and what came up around joy was that it's going to be taken away. So recognition that that's been sort of my story for my life, and that my authenticity is joyfulness. So it was a threat for growing up in an environment that was traumatic to be joyful, but my authentic self is a joyful, happy person. I also wanted to respect and acknowledge the range, because when we are aware, and to me, I got to just put it out there, happiness, joy is data for me. I don't attach. It's just no different than anger or sadness. But the range is important, from joyful, powerful to optimistic. There's a range within happiness. It's not just one thing. Proud is in there. Courage, I know you've used courageous a few times, but courageous is one of the, for me, one of the happy. It's part of happy. So I just want to acknowledge my authenticity is joyful. And I need to stay at that level to help my clients, not to go down to meet them, but to stay where I'm at so I can model the way. And I'm not joyful, happy, and dance around the house all day, but it's more my state, more my heart space state on a regular basis, rather than what was before was really a manipulated, traumatic state. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrea. I know a number of folks have questions, and there's a lot of stuff in the chat. And I know we're also at time, so I'm just taking a moment to pause. If this kind of space feels useful to you, this is what we're going to be doing in the course, except there'll be a bit more space for direct practice and not just me talking. And yeah, maybe I said what I need. Floral, do you want to say a thing? I know we're at time, so we'll just do the last question or two, and then weave out, and then I might stick around after if anybody wants to. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks for this. It's needed over here, and I think a lot of us are being asked to rework this. So in that question of what's so hard, I wonder if you can speak to, you talked a little bit in the beginning about the orientation towards sorrow, and for me, it feels also trauma related, and not just personal, whatever personal is, but like collective. And I think that stance of feeling, for me anyway, also raised in the United States conditioning as a white person. There's this sort of feeling I grew up with needing to shout that the house is on fire. And so much learning of truth and orienting towards sorrow had with it that sense of needing to hold what's true. And in
I'm
trauma,
with you, and go to the heart of it if you can, just in the question part in light of time. And I'm with you. Yeah.
That stance, I think, can become a traumatic narrative that like sorrow and suffering is true and joy is false. And I wonder if like the sort of sense of duty, obligation, needing to shout fire, needing to stand for where the suffering is, for me anyway, came with a need to not go to sleep. And so sort of equating joy with a state of sleepiness. And so that's being reworked in me. And I wonder, what you have to say about that.
I think one of the very subversive and powerful antidote to colonialism as it lives within our body is pleasure. Is really enjoying the moment and enjoying our life. So few people here in Spain in the last 7 months have asked me what I do for work. It is a fucking delight. I feel like anonymous. I love it. And and mostly people just want to hang out. Like we went to Carnival and I dressed up as one of the dwarves because our daughter was the evil queen, and we were teaching her how to poison her friend Rocio with the apple, and we were just having, like, we did not win the ham. There were many other more tricked out costumes and teams, and I don't even eat ham, but in any case I would have been gracious had we won it. But the part of the message is hay que participar, like you got to participate. It's what you do. And I'm like, this isn't a big town, but like a third of the town is out for Carnival. I'd never see that, at least where I've lived in the United States. And so when people are nurtured and loved and being held in community, we tend to be less materialistic and less easy to manipulate and more likely to look out for one another and to make choices that are generally bad news for empire and all of the funky dynamics that are going to take generations to really compost, but need composted as soon as possible. So, but yeah, I mean, I have all that stuff inside me as well. Just like, yeah, it's got to be serious and heavy and focus on the trouble. And there's wisdom to that too. There's a lot of folks avoiding that. And we also need to embody the kind of care and gentleness and love that we want the world to be about now. Because if we're not able to be it, then, well, we're just not there yet. It's harder to call that into being. We have to become the thing that we want to see. Yeah. And look, there's no, let me say this last thing, and then we'll have like an exit ramp and the talk's officially over, and then I'll hang out for a few more questions. There's no normative right way to be. Like, I get so fucking annoyed with spiritual teaching and being a spiritual teacher when the vibe is like, let me give you an even fancier, more compelling, charismatic version of how you should be. And there's just a lot of different ways to be. And I don't want, like, please don't take anything that I said or didn't say to be like, you should do it like this. It's more like, here's some different perspectives. Feel what lands as useful for you. And if you notice that you haven't been valuing how like the other dimensional, like ecological, cosmic potency of joy as it visits you as a guest in your cells and your psyche, well then don't be so rude. Let it move through. It's fine. You don't have to make an identity about it. You don't even have to tell social media you had that feeling. Just like feel your bliss. It's fine. And if you notice that it's really super vulnerable, it makes you feel sad to even get near it. And you're like, like, I want to get picked for the team, but I'm not going to get picked. Now I'm all vulnerable again, and I want it, and you just like, you tangled up about it. Then, yeah, that's a really fruitful place to be. That is a place where new energy and life can breathe into your world. That's good work, so to speak. That is work to metabolize the way that boring, life-crushing, like harmful empires come to live in your cells. It's a kind of reclaiming of your pleasure in partnership with the earth. So, yeah, let me say that. Much happy Purim for, sorry if I even said it wrong, I'm not Jewish, but you know, it's a very special joy celebrating holiday in Judaism today. So that, and thanks everybody for being here. I might as well leave the recording on, I suppose. If you need to peel out, then the talk is officially done, but I'll take a few questions just because I enjoy doing that. And then when I get tired, I'll stop. Aurora?
Yeah, when you were guiding us to think of people who have an easy time with joy, it was a little bit challenging because it was, you know, who performs joy and who do I think is really joyful? And what came to me is that the people I think are really joyful also are really sad. And I'm wondering if you feel like in order to feel real joy, you have to be able to feel real sadness too.
Probably. That's kind of, I mean, that's the typical wisdom on it, is like you know, if you want the garden, go to the fire. Like that there's a need to carve out space to feel deeply. someone who I think is I think of as an emotional adult, as the current Dalai Lama, 14th Dalai, the famous one, Tenzin Gyatso. And I don't know the man personally, but he just seems to be really well put together. And he's a happy person like he's in touch with joy. Like he's playful. Like he'll tease people and like, hey, and he's very intelligent and clever and multidimensional, but he's playful. And also, when confronted with real sorrow, I know that I don't know. What it came to mind of a story of, like, he visited the concentration camps in Auschwitz in Poland and Germany, and he part of me is interested is like, how does a person of this level of cultivation respond? And he's just sobbing, just crying, just like feeling the range. It's kind of where I'm going with it, is feeling the sorrow of all of it. And yeah, so I do like all those teachings, which are really prevalent on needing to feel the sorrow deeply in order to have access to joy. I think that's kind of true personally.
It's a little countercultural because there's currently this like kind of high vibration ethos where you're going to attract, the law of attraction. I just don't, but when you asked us, it didn't resonate with me.
I don't what I want to say, because I'm not chasing joy per se, when joy arises for me, I trust it, at least. Like, I know that there's something I see. I don't know, I'm still sorting all this out, but I don't see happiness as something to pursue exactly. I see it as a byproduct of a life well lived. We could get all into the semantics of it, but my joy for me comes from like meaningful service and feeling like I've really contributed somehow. We want to, like, I think it's true for other people. I know it's true for me. I want to be good. The part of me that is like it's like very pure child. I see it in our kids. Like they want to be good, and like, even though they might do very mischievous things at times, they also it would crush them to be like, oh, you're bad, you're a bad person. That's like the worst thing you could do. And I'm still in touch with that. I want, before the most elder powers in the universe, to be seen as a force for good. That brings me joy. And I think that's true for a lot of us. And we sometimes look for the approval in weird places and all that. But the impulse to do good is really wholesome and should be nurtured along at all ages, I think. I don't know that it has anything to do with your question, really, but thank you, Aurora, for what you're bringing. I follow the spirit of it, I think. Casey, did you want to say anything? And then Rebecca, yeah.
Hey, thanks so much for this talk. I've really gotten so much value out of it. And my question just has to do with, so from when I like take on the non-dual perspective that we're already the divine and we are the divine. I can kind of create this binary that like keeps me from being more of a relational being. And I've really found that for me, faith and humility and devotion is a real conduit for joy for me. So I'm just wondering if you could speak on that.
Yeah, it's like that for me too. I think there's a deep kind of conversation or binary. The tradition I know I have the most vocabulary for is a bit Yoruba tradition, but also Islamic Sufism, and in that tradition, at least, there's a conversation between the Tanzih and the Tashbih, the aspect of God that is totally transcendent and unknowable, and whatever you think it is, it's 3 steps ahead of that, and not even there either, and you can't define it, and it's the thing that never changes, and even that idea changes. So, and on the other hand, it's immanence. It's all of the details. It's you, it's me, it's Zoom, it's all the people on the call. It's every specific thing you could possibly think of, and meaning all the relational, specific nitty-gritty of our lives. And there's a tendency generally in a lot of spirituality to see, and I'm not saying you're whatever, I'm just going off what you said, which is just a little bit, there's a tendency to associate the sacred or God or something with that more transcendent quality. It's not false, it's just half the story. And I think in practice, I'm a Libra, and so it's like I'm always in this, but that, and so it looks like going to one extreme, going to another, going from one extreme to another. Like this is balance. This is death, static. There's no movement. It's not balance. The story's over. So we go into states or cycles where we're focused on our direct communion with the source or whatever like that, and then it's possible to get out of balance with that, or like identified with the sacred in that expression. And then when the kids crash into your room and they have a messy diaper, it's just like something that's just like not feeling very spiritual, it's then your mind on some level is like, not spiritual things have come into my spiritual experience, and your non-duality is for shit now, like it fell apart because God came in with a messy diaper, and you're like, I can't deal with this face of the divine right now. And so so we're I don't know, I'm not sure if you had a question, but that's what I wanted to talk about. Did you want to say more, Casey?
That all super resonated. I think some people call it one word for it is the more feminine approach or spiritual path, which is the eminence of everything and embracing life itself as, because it is paradoxical to assume that the non-dual reality is the transcended reality. It's actually pretty dualistic thinking. So that's helpful. And I think we have the same birthday. So I think the same. Yeah.
Great. It's good.
Thank you.
Share that with Confucius as well. So.
Oh, nice.
September 28th, for anyone who's that matters to. Thanks, Casey.
Thank you.
Maybe a last question or share from Rebecca, and then we'll find out. Sorry for folks in the chat. It's just a little too overwhelming to me to go through it and try to find the questions in there. I apologize for that. Go ahead, Rebecca. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, thank you so much. I was laughing at your example with the diapers, and Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Sacredness is everywhere. I love that.
Mm.
One of the things I wanted to bring is in the meditation. This is something I realize I'm struggling with. So where do you feel, I wrote down, where do you feel most connected to the land, the water, the sky, the mountains? And where do you feel that connection to everything? And I think I was inspired by the fact I've heard you speak a few times about moving to Spain. And I think about me feeling the awe of the mountains in Cape Town in South Africa, or the awe of some scenic place I was in California. And I'm pairing that with what you've just given as an example of, you know, sacredness everywhere, even in shit, you know, literal shit, like sacredness everywhere. And so I'm holding that, and I don't know how to formulate it into a question, but can you understand where I'm going?
I think so.
Okay.
One of the person who I find most resonance with, if I have to pick a singular, like a spiritual teacher that I know of in history, it's Ibn al-Arabi. I can put it in the chat, I guess, but I mean, he lived 800 years ago, more or less. But the reason I think of him in this moment is he's a very prolific writer and very like esoteric, and has a wide range as a writer and wrote a lot. But what I appreciate about his style of it is it's not like a really linear thing. It's like in this perspective, in this perspective, in this one, and this one, and this one. And this whole bundle of truth over here might be the flavor of truth that you're needing today, and this other bundle over here on this other day. And so when I say it's like left foot, left foot, it's like we go deep into the reality that, oh, even the shit of the world, even if we're going to take it there, that it's easier to imagine literal shit being sacred than human predatory behavior, for example. So then we really go down this like, oh man, Daniel, like really you got to weave that into a joy talk. And so like, where are we going? And so there's a way in which the far reaches of evil, so to speak, yes, are also God in a non-dual sense. However, it's simultaneously also true, and not like dualistic per se, to recognize that kindness is better than being an asshole, and that kindness and ethics are what hold the world together, and that it's worth dying for, and it's worth making major life changes and prioritizing your whole existence and how you spend your incarnation to align with certain values over others. And so it's all the way critically important to not be a relativist and not just be like, well, any point of view is equally valid. It's not. Some points of view are more true than others. Love and healing and kindness is more real. It's closer to the source than really selfish predatory behavior. It just is. And I'll like die on that hill, so to speak. I'm clear about that. And so I say that because those are two seemingly contradictory deep truths. No, they're just facets of a really multidimensional thing that we are made of, and that there's no one fixed position that is the position that will encompass all the nuance. the wisdom in its manifestation is going to be multifaceted, and we're going to and that doesn't mean we just sit back and look at it intellectually, because you never get anywhere like that. It has to be lived. And so it means we're going to go through cycles of being digested by certain specific teachings, and then you get shit out and you're like, oh, look, there's a whole nother perspective which I never would have been able to access had I not been chewed up by this first perspective. And part of it is, after that's happened like 25 times, you're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't totally get a tattoo and rebrand my life and make a new worldview based on the transformative process I'm having this month. Let me just hang in there, and I bet another one's coming. So I don't know if that speaks to it any, but that's what I was in the mood to say. So we're kind of in bonus round, so I'm not less committed to making sense for these questions. Good. Did you want to say anything, Flora, before we wrap? Are you good? Good to see you.
Okay, put me on the spot. I will just like, and this isn't exactly a question, but maybe something you have to share something about, but just in the drop-in, something that came up for me about how it's one of the ways I think it's like easiest for me to access states of joy is really like through what's sometimes called like compersion, like feeling like compassion, but just like in the way of feeling joy, or I think in Buddhism it's called like mudita. But this like really feeling, like, yeah, when you hear a bird song and you just feel happy because of so that kind of so there's something, and like on the kind of pivot of that is like, and I think it's been spoken to, like one of the most vulnerable things about joy, apart from like potentially being taken away, but it also this like it not being received, or like even being like maybe a betrayal, or someone else feels sad and then they maybe feel even more sad because of your joy or whatever. And I think that's kind of, for me, it's like part of that, because I've just in my experience, maybe even more than with other emotions, there's this quality of like, like the cup runneth over, and it just really wants to be shared, or like the sunshine that just wants to kind of, like make the flowers grow, that comes with joy. And maybe that's why it's so really like, or when I look at it, and you see this beautiful sunset and you just want to have someone to share it with, because it's like too big for you kind of on your own. So okay, I'll stop there. So, but yeah, if there's anything you want to speak to, that would be welcome.
You've obviously read Rilke, yeah? I mean, Rilke, you're a German speaker. So the Duino elegies, the 9th elegy. It's like I would learn German just to like appreciate the original. But Stephen Mitchell's translation in English is the one I enjoy the most. But I can't really capture it or say anything about it here, but it comes to mind when you're there's a feeling he captures at the end of that. It's something like about the challenge of speaking a true word, a real word, and what does the earth really need from us, but to be born within us. And isn't that what you've always wanted, speaking to the earth, and like that we become the earth, and that neither childhood, basically that nothing has become any smaller. None of my, I'm using the long form of it, but just saying that nothing has gone away, nothing's decreased, the memories, everything. And he goes into this in the other Duino elegies, that about the different feelings and fears, everything from childhood, that nothing is diminished, and superabundant being wells up in my heart. It's kind of the rendering in English of the last line. And he's saying like even one of your springtimes is enough to win me over, speaking to the earth. It's kind of like, you got me. And I don't even know, like, I don't know what my value is here, but it must be something, because I'm here and I bear witness, and I put these hands in the earth, and I'm rejecting nothing, and I'm not turning away from the moment. Yeah. So that kind of I don't know. Yeah, of course, that there's an impulse that with joy, that it's relational in a sense, and that there's a way in which we wish to be witnessed in that. I mean, for me at least, that's part of what psychologically is the thing that has made it, that I've just had to work through and practice doing differently, because I had a strong imprint from my early life that if I am joyful and I express it, it's not really going to be received. You know, kindness to my family and their humanity, their limitations, all that. And but it's the same part of me that wants to be good, and wants to be like, hey, do you see me? Am I good? Like before the elders and God and the earth, and like am I good? Do you see me? Like, do you see my joy? I'm happy. That kind of thing. And the conditioning I've received as an intellect and as a doctor of psychology would dismiss that impulse and minimize it. And I think that comes from fear, because I think the impulse is actually a really wholesome one. And I think the longing to be good and to be received by the world is a really sacred impulse, because we want to do right by our soul on some deep level. And we want, even if we don't do it until after we're dead, we can do it before death is kind of better. But even if we wait till after, when it's a time for reckoning, we want to be like, you did a good job with your life. You did a good job. That matters. We want that. If you don't want that, like, why not? What's going on? Are you sure you don't want that? So, yeah. All right. I'm going to rest. I appreciate you all. Thanks for hanging out a little bit if you did. And, come join a thing if you want. We have a good time with the lessons. They're kind of like this. So, okay. Take good care, everybody. Yep.